All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for session 4 of Advocacy Training. This is the last session of this program. I'm so excited. I can't believe we're finally here at the end. It's been a wonderful program so far, and I just am so happy to have gone on this journey with all of you. So as usual, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know your name, your age, and where you're from. We'll get started here in just a minute, but yeah, feel free to get to know us in the chat. We have a great session coming up for you, and we will get started in just a minute. We have so many friends from so many different places. Once again, we have Brazil, South Africa, California, France, Spain, Japan. Oh my goodness. Washington, Malaysia, wonderful. Portugal, all over the place. Zambia. This is so cool, you guys. I'm so excited. This has been also the largest advocacy training program that we have ever done. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. A million times thank you for joining us. It has just been wonderful. So as we get started here, just a reminder that if you missed any of the first 3 sessions, all of those recordings will be available on, or at least the first 3 recordings already are available on the World Ocean Day YouTube channel. And I will get the recording up of this 4th session as soon as possible. So be sure to check that out if you have to drop out early or anything. And yeah, so here is the agenda, basically the same as we've done for the last 3 sessions. We have our wonderful panelists, a little discussion and Q&A, and then a lot of you have asked questions about the certificate of completion, so I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. But as usual, feel free to, as we're going through the discussion, send any questions that you have in the group chat or use the Q&A feature, and we will hopefully get to your questions at the end. So first things first, moving right along, our first speaker of the day is Shakira Dawood. She is from South Africa with the Youth for MPA's organization and has done a lot of wonderful work with grassroots organizations. And I will let Shakira introduce yourself a little bit.
Thank you, Laura. So excited for the session. Okay, so as Laura mentioned, I'm Shakira Dawood from South Africa. I am currently inducted as the chairperson for Youth for Marine Protected Areas, and just involved in many grassroots spaces, or not even necessarily just all over the place. I like to put my foot and be involved in everything. Yeah, and I'm excited to share my knowledge and learn from the other participants here. Um, I'm looking forward to having a good session. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakira. Next up, we have Riza from the High Seas Alliance, has done so much cool work over the last 10 years doing conservation work throughout Asia and beyond, working with the UN. So I'll let Riza introduce yourself as well.
Thank you, Laura. So I'm Riza. I'm the regional coordinator for Asia for High Seas Alliance. So we work with different organizations and governments to push for the ratification. A lot of campaigns work in Asia. And then before, in my past life, I'm also doing communications work with the UN. So I'm excited to interact with all of you and share what I learned from the past experiences and learn from your stories as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Riza. And where are you joining us from again?
I'm joining from Manila, so I've seen some participants from Asia. So I think we're sharing pretty much the same time zone now.
Time zone. Yeah, it is 1 a.m. where Riza is right now. So if you are joining us, I really appreciate your dedication to the program because I know that is not easy to stay up late. And last but not least, our third speaker for today is Maria from the Sustainable Ocean Alliance in Guatemala, is doing a lot of really awesome marine biology research and studies, and is working on some really cool projects. So Maria, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Laura. Hi, everyone. I am very excited to be here. So, as Laura said, I am Maria Schwenbeck from Guatemala. I am the hub leader from SOA, that means Sustainable Ocean Alliance. We are the largest organization leading by youth, working towards the ocean conservation. And in Guatemala, we are working in different projects as mangrove restoration and ocean conservation. And now we are just starting a campaign for deep sea mining. So I am happy to share some of our experience and learn from the other girls here. Thank you.
Awesome. Yay. Cool. So let's jump right in. So obviously, throughout this program, we've talked about, we started off with just basics of the ocean-climate connection, how the ocean is our biggest ally in the fight against climate change. Then we moved to social media and communication. So how do we talk about narrative and messaging when we're doing an event or a campaign? And then we moved right into event planning and fundraising. So what are the technical aspects of putting something like that together? But now with the campaign organizing session, we're going to talk about some of the larger big picture stuff. So I'm going to pose this question to all three of you, and then whoever wants to answer can go ahead. So first things first, how does building collective power within a movement contribute to achieving a more substantial impact? So basically, why do we have campaigns? What is the purpose? Why are we out here working together for these issues that we all care about so much? I'll let whoever wants to go first go ahead. Yeah, Shakira, go ahead.
Okay, cool. So I genuinely believe when you have collective power, you have an organized people. And when you have an organized people, you have people power. And when you have people power and you combine that with organized funding, then you have the ability to disrupt people in power because now you have actual power in people. So because it's in numbers, right? And people combined with the organized money equals your substantial impact. And when you have this, it's you're able to tap into multiple resources and you're able to have this power in collective thinking, and you can contribute more substantially than having an individual impact yourself trying to make your own campaign and create your own movement. Having this organized committee to take these actions forward, to take the movement forward, the campaign, you're able to do much more. And yeah.
Yeah, Maria, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to add that yes, like working to have an impact and changing human behavior is not easy at all, right? So we need to build this collective power, and like a movement is very crucial to achieve more sustainable impacts, and like working together brings and pulls talents, ideas, effort to address these very complex issues that working alone is not going to have the same impact as working all of together towards the same objectives. And yeah, at the end, create and build this impact that we all want to achieve.
All right, so maybe in addition to that, from behavior change and people power movement, going to in the context of policy, so public engagement is the core of any campaign's work, and you wanted to create noise, you wanted to create more pressure to influence policymakers. So it's important that a lot of sectors are involved, especially the public, because the more the people understand what we are pushing for, the more support that we get. And this pressure from different sectors can actually affect policy change in the long process.
Very much so. I think all three of you touched on really important factors in campaign organizing, whether it's, building awareness around a specific issue or trying to influence policy. There's so many different avenues that we can take, as we've talked about throughout the program. But yeah, it really is just about, getting that collective action together and one person might be a drop in the bucket, but a bunch of people working together can create a whole wave of change. So really great foundation for this discussion. So the next question is kind of a two-parter. I think I'm going to focus on the first question. The second question kind of adds to the first question too. So if you want to answer that, that's fine as well. But first things first, how do we align the individual motivations of members of our team with the broader campaign goals? Because even if you are the lead organizer of a campaign, you still have a bunch of people working with you, and everybody that you're on your team with has individual reasons and individual passions for why they are participating in this campaign. And they might have different ideas and thoughts about why we might go about doing something in a particular way. So how can you balance all of that with your team and make sure that even though everybody might have their own individual thoughts, how do you kind of streamline that and make sure that it all aligns with the broader campaign goals? So I'll let anybody who wants to go first, go ahead. Riza, go ahead.
Right. So maybe based on experience, when you engage a lot of team members or a lot of teammates, in even different partners in a campaign, sometimes they just look on the vision or the goal of your campaign. But actually before we reach that goal, you have a lot of small steps um to do and to complete. And sometimes you just have to align and select people who are fit in these stages before you reach that goal. I just would like to share a few experience engaging, for example, some youth members in one of the campaigns that I handled before, that they see the prestige of running a campaign is not always like a walk in the park. So, and sometimes when they were assigned some task or lead some activities that are not quite aligned with their expectations, they tend to be discouraged and, pull out from what we are doing. And it's important to underscore that these small activities are actually, when they are done frequently, regularly, they can become impactful, and that can result to achieving your goal. So it's part of a whole process, and that whole process actually are comprised of small contributions from these individuals. So it might be you can be a creative that's part of a creative team organizing an event, or probably a concert for a cause. And then there are also some people who are more focused on operations, doing grant management and all. So it's it's a contributory process that shouldn't be overlooked or taken for granted. Yeah.
Very much so. Shakira or Maria, if you would like to add, go ahead. Shakira, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, just to add on to what Riza said, is that I think um, you need to have the clear conservation why in your campaign, is because now you're able to set clear actionable tasks that can happen, or can how you can vie forward with the campaign, and how you get your fellow team members, have them and their passions clear to the organize or the campaign, sorry, is that you need to have clear and open communication. I think it's very necessary to pay a listening ear to your team members and try to find common ground where you listen to them. You have this open communication. You have built this relationship of trust and respect. And you're like, okay, this is what the larger, broader campaign is about. How do we now hear and listen to what you have to say, what your passions are, and now incorporate, and how do we find it fitting within the broader campaign? So I think for me, it is open communication, trying to seek and find this common ground, having respect, and yeah, that's how you're going to develop and find your passion within the campaign.
Yes, I only would like to add that, yeah, maybe different like individuals or organization, we can be working sometimes in different sectors, but we need to like try to keep in mind that most of us can share the same motivation and the same vision. For example, like for ocean conservation, and I'm going just to bring a quick sample for Guatemala, and that we are building the campaign for deep sea mining. Like we are connecting with people from fisheries sector, for example, for human rights sector, for conservations, for from students, from academia. So all of us are working in different sector, but all of we wants to conserve the ocean, right? So we know that deep sea mining can have different impacts, can impact in the tuna fisheries, tourists, and the whole ecosystem, right? So we can link all of these different parts of sections with all of these different individuals. So yeah.
Very much so. I think, Maria, that interdisciplinary approach is super, super important. We'll talk a little bit more about, identifying those types of collaborators in our communities in a little bit. But Shakira, thank you for addressing the second question as well. And I think, Riza and Maria, you also both kind of touched on this as well. That conservation why, right? What is the conservation why? It's why we are doing what we're doing, why we care about these issues, why it is impacting our friends, our families, our peers, and our communities. Like, what is it that we're going after? And I think all of the things that you guys have talked about for this question kind of explain why we go about doing these things and how we can implement those ideas, those principles into the campaign broadly. If any of you have anything else to add, go for it, or we can move to the next question. Yeah, Riza, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned about the why, and practically in the campaigns work, the why is your passion. Um, it's important that you have a um, clear cut vision of why you are doing these campaigns work or why you are doing this movement. And this passion, I would like to touch on another important thing, that when you have your passion, this is your fuel, but you should have also your commitment. Your commitment is your driving force. And sometimes you get burnout. I mean, that's the reality when you do campaigns work. So um you have your passion, but when your passion is um kind of having some lying low, what do you do? How are you going to stay committed with what you are doing? And that's very important when you really wanted to be part of a big movement or any campaigns work. It's not always about passion, but you know how committed are you to keep your passion alive despite all the probably the hurdles and the setbacks that you might encounter when you implement all your strategies, your activities. Yeah.
Yeah, Shakira, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was having struggle on muting. Um, yeah, I think just to add on what Riza is saying, it's exactly that. Like, you have your passion, but when you have burnout, what do you do? And I think it's with regards to your team members, that's why I think it's so important to choose a very good team that you can like. You can't have someone who's like half here, half not here, because then when you're having burnout, you need to be able to kind of feed off their energy to some extent. Like, how do I like continue? Also acknowledging and recognizing that you're like a small part and the campaign is like so much bigger. Well, that doesn't sound very nice, but that the campaign is much larger than you and you're doing great things. I think acknowledging that this is a campaign, the movement is so much bigger and you're just contributing, and like just keep going because there's so many other people that are doing the same thing and we will affect change. I think also just keeping optimistic that change will come. And yeah.
Maria, did you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted just like a very brief from what was the question. So yes, the why serves as the guiding question that is going to help you to develop your other components of the campaign. So after the why and you define it, you can define the what, right? Like what do you want to achieve? And then the target audience that are going to be the who you are going to involve in your campaign, and who you want to give the message through the campaign, right? And then how are you going to do it? It's going to be like social media campaign, a virtual one, or meetings in person. So all of these questions are very important just to create a strategy from the campaign in general.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for giving such wonderful answers for this. I think, Maria, exactly what you said is exactly why it's great to have a conservation why. And then Shakira and Riza, the talking about burnout is also super, super important for this conversation because Shakira, I think you said that, having those members of your team is really important so that you can lean on them. If you're struggling and you have a lot going on in your life, if you know that you have like really strong people around you and you need to, for whatever reason, take a step back for a little bit, and you can be confident in knowing that like this campaign is still going to move forward, even if you have to like step back for a while. So thank you for touching on that because it's very, very, very important. So moving on to this next question, kind of building off of that conservation why, when you are actually in the nitty gritty and you're starting to sit down and really plan for your campaign, what are the first kinds of things that you want to talk about, right? We have the who, the what, the why, the where, the how. But how do you actually, go about doing that? I know it's a conversation with the members of your team, but I also wanted to touch on this second question here. We also talked about, Maria, you mentioned those interdisciplinary partnerships, right? So how do you actually find those kinds of people and collaborate that with them within your community? So whoever wants to go first can go ahead. Shakira, go ahead.
Okay, just in developing an initial plan for a conservation campaign and what are like the other crucial considerations, I think it's very necessary, and we've spoken about this, but a little bit on like when you have like a clear aim and then you have actionable tasks, I think that's very necessary. And also I find like, sometimes what we tend to do is we do too much. So I think it's necessary for a campaign to have one or two main concepts that it continuously perpetuates. You can't go, for example, like for Y4MPAs, Youth for Marine Protected Areas, one of our campaigns right now is the Maziwe 30 by 30. So essentially 30% of marine protected areas, we advocate for 30% to be protected by 2030. And we can't have like an education workshop and then we're advertising our beach cleanup, we're saying break free from plastics, we're giving you how you need to be more sustainable. You can't do that because people have, and your individuals and your active citizens in your movement, they have a certain amount of like that they can keep in their head, and you can't overwhelm them, you can't inundate them with multiple messages. You need to keep your campaign one or two main concepts that you continuously perpetuate. And how do you identify and collaborate with potential within your community? Um, Let me continue to think about that one. Hand over.
Yeah, Maria, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to add to that yeah, um, the considerations that are very important is just to understand who is your target audience. If you are doing a campaign for like policies or for a community, so yeah, trying to understand that is going to help you to create a plan and how to spread that message. And as Shakira said, just try to keep clear messages, for example, and be very punctual, like messages to call the action. For example, don't waste energy, defend the deep, or include also like signatures, petitions, and that is going to help you also to know how people is getting involved in your campaign and to tackle the impact as well, and to know how much people is joining the effort.
Uh, so maybe in addition to what Maria said, she already mentioned about, um, who will be the audience, who do we target when we do campaigns work, and it's important that we remember. I always say this whenever I share something about campaigns work, that the cardinal rule in doing campaigns is, in any campaigns work, not just in conservation, but targeting everyone is practically targeting no one. So it's important that you have a real target, and because eventually you have to measure your success, and you cannot measure your success if and like what Shakira said, you shouldn't spread your resources too thinly, to the point that instead of creating a deep impact, you're just doing like one time big time activities that barely make some dent in what you should be doing. So I think that's important, and I would like to share this. I'll be sharing a link here. You can find several versions of this guide, but this is what I always do whenever I do campaigns workshop. It identifies potential allies and other sectors or other groups in your community that you still need to pull in your circle to be, one of the believers, one of your partners. So we do like power mapping. It's, if you remember your geometry in high school, it's like doing some coordinates and the y-axis and the x-axis. You just need to plot who are the most influential people or influential groups in your community. Are they ally or are they on the opposition side? So you will eventually see who should be your target audience, what type or key messaging you should be doing, and how to approach these people. It's really like a one-stop shop when you do campaigns work. You can get a lot of insights when you complete like a power mapping and analysis. So that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Riza. That's a wonderful resource. I'm excited to kind of dig into that more. I've not seen this before, so I'm really excited to learn myself. But yeah, I think all three of you really hit on some of the most important things. And I think really, Shakira, I mean, all three of you kind of touched on this, is streamlining that messaging and making sure that you have that like one or two specific things that you're going to go after, because not only will that kind of prevent the burnout, but also having that targeted message. I think, Riza, what you said was, trying to have everybody do something is like having everybody do nothing at that point. And honestly, that's very true, because if you are spreading yourself too thin, you can't have that really targeted action. And it's sometimes like the other side of that is, feeling like you're not doing enough, because everybody who works in conservation and sustainability, we all care so deeply about so many different aspects of, the issues that are facing our planet. And it can sometimes be really hard to just like ignore some things and focus really tightly on some of the other things. And if you're focused on that for so long and you feel like you're, it can kind of mess with your head a little bit. Riza,
Yeah, maybe just wanted to add something on the one that you mentioned, and um doing a lot of work, taking all the tasks that you want to do. When you conceptualize a campaign, it seems like I want to do this and that and that. Like you have a very, very long list of the things that you wanted to do. But the reason why we partner with other organization is because they have, there are organizations who are working, for example, on the deep sea, organizations focusing on fishery, organizations focusing on youth education, organization focusing on research. So there are a lot of entities out there that are doing awesome work also, and you just have to complement and just avoid duplicating their work and just complement each other. And I think that way you can effectively use your resources. Yeah.
very much so. And that relates a lot to what Maria said. So Maria, you have something to add as well?
Yes, I just wanted to, yes, add a little bit. And just sometimes, like when you are doing an effort and building a campaign, it's a lot of things that brings you there is that you are very passionate and you really want to create a change. But sometimes you can feel lonely, like working. And the very important thing is that you can keep and create your community. And that is something that is very special from SOA, that we are youth working all together in a community and we are supporting each other. In every country, we have different hubs that at the end is our community. And maybe we can be active, like sometimes just five, but we are not alone. We are five working together and bringing more collaboration and spreading the message. So yeah, that is something very important to me.
Very much so. Beautifully said, Maria. That community is so important. And then Shakira, you also have something to add. Go ahead.
Thank you, Laura. I just wanted to add that, like within the South African context, I think when you're identifying and collaborating within your community, I think it's so necessary to take note of this cultural competency, whereby you have such a diverse range of people within the space. You need to identify and understand, okay, how did they fit in within this context of this campaign, and then giving them like specific actions and how they are now going to contribute to this campaign and making it a success. Yeah, I think that's just what I want to add.
Very much so. Yeah. And it all comes back to, taking a step back, looking at who is in your network, who is in your community, and who is on your team, and how do you leverage everybody, everybody on that team brings a specific skill set, a specific area of expertise, and everybody has something different to contribute to the campaign. And it's all about like strategically figuring out where everybody fits. So I think that's a really wonderful way to kind of round out this question, Shakira. Thank you. And thank you all. This is a wonderful discussion. Now, this next question, I think, Riza, you kind of mentioned the after the fact of the campaign a little bit earlier, talking about how do you actually know if your campaign was successful? Like, how do you measure the impact? So the first question here is, are there any like very specific measurables, indicators that when you're organizing a campaign, you should really be paying the most attention to when you want to look at your campaign when you're done, or you've hit your limit on the petition or the deadline or whatever that endpoint is for you. Now it's time for you to look back and figure out what went well, what maybe you can change the next time. What are some of those really specific things that we should be thinking about?
All right, maybe I can go ahead
Sure.
first. And so I think based on experience, campaigns work is one of the hardest things to measure because, behavior change doesn't happen overnight. Policy change takes a very, very long time. And unlike, for example, infrastructure projects that after probably 6 months to a year, you can see something very tangible that you can hold and, walk in. Campaigns work is probably some people would say it's pretty much abstract, and it's more it's it's just a concept. Some people would look at campaign as just a concept and ideas, that how would you translate your concept and ideas into action. So I think it's important that when you do your plan and strategies, you put a specific timeline, um what how long your campaign will be running, and by, let's say, you divide it into probably quarter or probably semester or midterms, so that you have a regular monitoring and evaluation. At what stage are you already? Are you lagging behind, or are you quite advanced in terms of doing your activities? And I'd like to mention some activities that probably some would say, oh, that's quite easy if that's the measurement of the campaign. Like how many um how many people sign if you are doing a signature campaign, how many people sign in your signature campaign? Those are some very straightforward metrics. Another one, if you are doing a crowdfunding campaign, how much did you raise in a span of 3 months or 6 months? Because crowdfunding campaign is, some of these efforts are actually the bread and butter of different charitable organizations. If you are doing a policy campaign, like if in a span of, let's say, 18 to 24 months, were you able to attend technical working group meetings? Did the policy or the bill that you are supporting actually passed into law? So those are the kinds of metrics and indicators that you can put in your campaign's work plan and budget. Yeah.
Yeah, Shakira, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I don't have anything additional like on Riza, what Riza said. Our specific metrics or indicators that also there's so much to gauge, and behavior change also does not happen overnight, as Riza mentioned. We also use like your social media, how much of likes and how much of engagement our social media posts get. When we have an event, how many people show up. We'd try having, or I believe last year we were having like like there's a kind of a debrief or just a session with our general following. We had a Zoom call and we had a poll, what time can you attend? And then we had a Zoom call just asking, okay, what do you want from us? Or what do you expect from us in the next year? So having those kind of debrief sessions. Youth for Marine Protected Areas currently starting a newsletter, and so that newsletter we encourage our participants to sign up for, whereby in that newsletter we tell them like what we've done, what we're doing, how they can get involved, so we can keep them in the loop on what's happening. And the second question was how do we recommend? Must I answer the second question now? Is it okay? Okay. How do you recommend the momentum, sustaining the momentum for continued engagement? And I think it's necessary that you continue to engage with your participants. And it's so something that we did as Youth for Marine Protected Areas. We were doing a meme a week challenge. So one of the steering committee members would be message and be like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. And we'd post it on our general group and we'd say, okay, guys, what we're doing is we're gonna post a meme on this Monday meme day, or whatever you want to, whatever it is called. And the person with the most funniest meme would get data, however you want to say it. And yeah, there was that. It really got people very active on the group chat. People would engage. We'd had a lot of people posting. And yeah, I think from session 2, the social media one, like mentioning how you need to have like that fluff in your social media engagement. It's not just always serious science or just always do this, do that. You need to have those memes and engage with your following on other nodes as well. So just in that way, I think it's really would be really effective on how you can keep the momentum and keep your participants engaged. Thank you.
Maria, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. I think the Shakira and Sia say a lot of really good insights, but I just wanted to mention that the thing that is very important too, as Rita say, is that adaptability and flexibility is very important, and have like it's really important just to have a final measure and evaluation of the campaign, but having like in a middle stage as well, because like campaigns often also requires like a judgment, and the circumstances sometimes are changing. Sometimes if you are doing like policies, if you are working into policies, sometimes like the government just change the point of view or anything can happen, So if that things happens, you can reevaluate and just adjust your campaign, and just being adaptable and flexible is going to help you to reach what is your goal.
Very much so, Riza. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So Shakira mentioned earlier about like the social media measuring the engagement, it's also challenging, for example, how are we going to measure that, this engagement actually translate into action? And that's why in my like personal point of view, social media is a very good platform when you wanted to raise awareness. But so it's still questionable. For example, some social media campaigns that turned viral, um there is some question on the integrity. For example, people do it for the gram or the likes or the clout and all. So it's really quite contentious on that note. And but for me, it's really an effective platform if used properly. So it's also, it's just there, and it's been, evolving fastly. So I think social media is quite a tricky one, but yeah, a lot of campaigns can be done through social media, and it can really influence not even awareness, but also policy change. And maybe just another one on behavior change campaign. If some of our youth participants here are interested in doing community-based campaigning, and it's more on social or behavioral change campaigning, one of the things that this is a traditional way of doing behavioral change campaign is they do knowledge, attitude, and practice survey. But I'd like to warn you that it is quite costly, and it takes some time before you completed this kind of like a like a baseline assessment. And for me, instead of doing a full-blown knowledge, attitude, and practice survey, why not do a focus group discussion, document the result of the discussion properly, and then probably after 1 year or 2 years, go back and do another focus group discussion. Because doing survey really costs a lot, but sometimes when you need to get resources or apply for grant and funding, sometimes they require like a solid baseline data to do it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Rosette. I want to recommend Google Forms, because that is a free way to do surveys, and that is actually how we will be sending our feedback survey to all of our lovely participants for this program. But I also wanted to just mention that, Riza, what you were talking about, there's so many different avenues of going about measuring these different things, and social media being one of them. Definitely, we talked a lot about that. Thank you for bringing that up, Shakira, in the other session. And then also, Maria, you mentioned, you said you didn't have that much to add. I do want to point out that you did say you had earlier this community to lean on, and we can also have these conversations with members of our team and see what they have to say. I think that's also very important. And Shakira, what you mentioned, building off of that community idea, doing like a meme competition is such a fun and creative way to keep that engagement going. So yeah, I think all of the things that you guys have been talking about totally build off of one another. Shakira, I did see you had your hand raised. If you did want to add something else, you can go ahead.
I did want to add something else, but it did fly out of my mind. But there was something that I
It
wanted to
happens.
share.
It's okay.
Additional to that was that I just didn't want to romanticize the idea of like, when you say keep the momentum, it is really difficult. And how we said, behavior change does not happen. Riza said that doesn't happen overnight. And I think that it's so necessary to acknowledge that um, even in when we did these kind of debrief sessions and we asked on our group chats, like, guys, give us a time, vote on the poll, when are you most available? And we had the Zoom call and we had maybe 30 to 40 people say they were available at this time, but then there's only like 5 to 10 people show up at the Zoom call. So it's still very difficult to get that engagement from the youth. And I think that owes to how then do you translate your campaign into something that they can relate to, and that speaks to about like when we spoke about the passion and yeah, those aspects of it, how you get your passion into the campaign. And yeah, that's it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. I think there are a couple of questions in the Q&A in the group chat. I will start with this one in the Q&A. And again, folks, as we are going through answering these, feel free to continue the conversation in the Q&A feature and the group chat. We have about 15 minutes to the top of the hour. So this first question in the Q&A, is it necessary for a campaign always? I think that's a really interesting question because, if you are a member of a community that's facing a really specific environmental issue, there are a lot of different ways that you can address that issue. So what does that look like? Is a campaign like a petition? Is it we were talking about policy or behavioral change. It can also be awareness, just in general, education. We can use social media. We can use in-person events. So what are your guys' thoughts on, do we always have to run a campaign when we find these kinds of issues? Is that always how we have to address these things? Riza, go ahead.
Yeah. For me, it's not always campaign. But campaign can be part of your, say, your project or program. You can always create a component that will help people understand better what you are doing. Because when you, for example, in one coastal community, the problem is more on um illegal fishing. Um, but and there's, for example, another establishment of marine protected area. So you don't have always to make solution out of campaigns. You can propose tangible projects or programs, but at the same time, it's important to note that the more people understand what you are doing, the more support that you can get from them. And that's the way to sustain one program or project in a community. Because, these programs and projects are time bound, and, the resources are very limited. So how do you sustain those kinds of efforts? You can only sustain that if there is a support from the community. And for us to be able to do that, they should understand what we are doing. Yeah.
Maria, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to mention that it's very important to create a plan. For example, like if it's very local initiative, or it depends, right? There are so many different tools that you can use. The question and why, what, how can help you a lot. For example, there are different tools like workshops, working like how do you say, like educational programs. It depends how much you want to engage and what impact you want to cause. And yeah, for example, like if you want to do something more local, or for example, like illegal fishing, you can start working and doing workshops and educational programs with the fishermen and help them just to work together and understand that it's very important to conserve the resources, but it's not always going to need a campaign. It's going to, yeah, it's going to depend what is the impact and how do you want to do it.
Very much so. We are getting so many good questions in here. There is one question in the group chat: how do you use social media properly? And I actually want to kind of tack that question onto another question here in the Q&A. Michael asked, given that conservation is often viewed as a nonprofit activity rather than a commercial one, how do you make it commercially viable or appealing to financiers or donors? And I think that the social media question kind of leads into that a little bit. We talked a lot about social media in session 2, so I would definitely recommend, if you missed that session, watch the recording on YouTube. But I want to kind of talk about this donation question as well. We also talked about event fundraising in last week's session. But, when we're talking about what it means to make a campaign appealing to donors, how do you actually approach that? What does that look like for you?
Maybe I can go first.
Go ahead.
And maybe not only in campaign in general, but in conservation work, because the question, like, very specific on conservation work, it's similar to what I experienced before with the government, local government, that they see conservation work as liability. in budget. When you do budgeting, it's not an asset or an income generating. Like all the resources that you will put out for any conservation work will not give you any return of investment. But there are a lot of studies now that, these ecosystem services that we are trying to conserve actually have higher returns when we invest more in conservation. So, for example, um, when you approach donors, for example, corporate donors, if you are familiar with corporate social responsibility, it is now being transitioned to environment and social safeguard. And that kind of effort is usually required in any corporate entity. So they should incorporate any environment and social safeguard measures in their companies, let's say principles or code of ethics or any policies. So that's one way to approach potential corporate donors. But in terms of funding institutions, um, like for example, when I say funding institutions, these are the institutions that provide grants, like probably United Nations organizations and other um funding institutions. You usually provide a sustainability plan or sustainability strategy that after the funding in, let's say, 3 to 5 years, how are you going to make sure that this project or the results of this project will still run even if the project already ends. So you approach it differently based on the type of donor that you are approaching. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful, Riza. And I think that that also kind of talks about some of the other questions in this Q&A as well, like who might the donors be for a campaign? Freya asked that question. I think that's very relevant. And Shakira, I see your hand raised as well. If you have something to add, go ahead.
I think there's just much to note there, Riza. Thank you so much for that share. As treasurer for a shorter period of time for Youth for Marine Protected Areas, I was like, I should know this. But thank you so much. It really took much from that. I think for me, applying for funding in that position, it's always been through like funding institutions where we do have like these kind of grants, and then you have these answers to respond to of the sustainability and how you're going to use this funding, how is it going to benefit, who is it going to benefit, and then just having like these very necessary questions that the donors then need and answering it to your best ability. Having that plan, speaking with your team and saying, okay, this is how we're going to go forward. This is what we're going to do. What campaigns are we taking on? And as you said, like with different donors, you respond differently. I think it's necessary, like when you're speaking with these donors, you note kind of their missions or values and their core what they would like to see, and then try to incorporate that with your missions and values, and find the common ground between them. I think I also have a little bit of a question as well in terms of who may the donor be. I think it's so necessary to suss out like that you're not asking for donations from a corporation that just wants some kind of a green label, or to have that stamp on them and say that, oh, we fund this and this and this conservation campaign and that one, but they're not doing like for example Coca-Cola and COP, biggest polluter. How now you're funding COP? Like, make it make sense. So I think that's just something to note. Thank you.
Definitely, Shakira. Thank you for bringing that up. We talked a little bit about greenwashing at the end of last week's session when we were talking about event planning, fundraising. And yeah, that's a great example. Coca-Cola and COP, man, it's horrible. A lot of questions for them on that front. But yeah, thank you guys for answering those questions. I think we have 5 minutes left, and I do have some announcements at the end, so I do want to make sure we have time for that. But there are 2 more questions in here that I think are kind of complementary of each other. So the first one is, how can you draw awareness within a high school to get more people engaged or excited to learn about an organization? And then somebody else asked, how can we find alliances with people or organizations that you don't know anybody in your area whose main focus is specifically ocean conservation? And the reason I wanted to kind of combine these questions, and I think this will be our last Q&A question, is, it kind of goes back to finding your audience, right? We've talked a little bit about that. How do you, figure out who is available in your area, whether it's a high school or other organizations that you're trying to find? And it also kind of goes back to that interdisciplinary approach, Maria, that you had mentioned earlier. So if any of you guys have something to say about that, that'll be our last Q&A question for now. Chakira, go ahead.
I think I'm going to answer the first part. And so something that Y4MPAs is currently doing is putting ourselves in a career expo. So like engaging with grades of all levels between in high school, grade 8 to 10, perhaps even grade 12 students will be there as well, and engaging with them and telling them, speaking to them about different kind of fields. I feel like when I was in school, you only thought about like law, accounting, medicine, those larger fields that you can get into. But attending a career expo is also teaching them about these different fields that you can get into, and then telling them like what you can research, how you can go about doing it. There's so many niche fields within it as well. And then so essentially it's that, like, find opportunities as an organization, find opportunities where you can get involved and create these kind of workshops where now you're going to go out to schools, create education campaigns that are tailored to speaking about your campaign to high school students and primary school students. That's also something that we're currently doing. So yeah, I just find the opportunity, reach out to the schools, and put your best foot forward in actioning that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Maria, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to answer a little bit of the second questions. Like sometimes I know we don't know much people in conservation area, but for example, something that have works for me is that I go on a research for organization in my area or in my country, and I look for the email and I write that email right away. And most of the time we sometimes can be scared, like they don't know me, I don't know if they're going to reply my email, but a lot of times they do. So, and if they don't, you can keep looking for it. Don't be scared of it. And other thing that I wanted to mention is that if you haven't looked for the website from SOA, I invite you to look on it. And we are a big community. We are in like 165 countries. So if you are interested, you can be part of our community. And there is the information from different countries and hubs. And we are always looking to grow our family and get more volunteers or more people involved. So yes, you can look for it, and I'm sure someone is going to reply back. And yes, and it's a very important way just to get involved, and we are just youth. And so yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. I think that's a super helpful way to kind of round out this discussion. Somebody asked in the chat, she's with Sustainable Ocean Alliance. And I think, Maria, what you said is applicable to all of our organizations: Sustainable Ocean Alliance, High Seas Alliance, and Youth for MPAs, and the Ocean Project and World Ocean Day. All of us have very specific types of programmings and campaigns that we're always looking for, more hands on deck. So, if you're interested in getting involved in any of our organizations, we would all love to have you. So somebody asked yes, thank you, Maria. I was just going to say, if you wanted to make sure that goes to everybody in the chat, not just the hosts and panelists. I'm going to move on to our certificates of completion. So we are now at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can. But yes, thank you guys so much for joining us for all 4 of these sessions. In the chat, I'm about to send, let me just make sure I have the link. I'm going to send our feedback survey. Let me make sure I get that in there right now before I forget. The link to the feedback survey will also be sent out in the Zoom follow-up email to the webinar. In order to get your certificate of completion, you need to fill out the entire feedback survey before next Sunday on the 21st of April. If you're able to do that, we will send you a certificate of completion. It's pretty easy. The feedback survey is definitely a little long, but as we were talking about, like these measurement things for our campaigns, these metrics, that's basically what that is for us for this program. So if you want to take a look at that feedback survey almost as a learning experience for yourself and see what kinds of questions that might be helpful to ask, that's also something that you can do. Oh, the form is not accepting responses. Thank you. I will fix that as soon as this call is over. I will make sure that is open right now. Settings, responses, accepting responses. Okay, so it should be fixed now. Thank you for flagging that. It will be fixed. But yeah, that's basically the process for the certificate of completion. Our last announcements, all of the recordings will be available on the YouTube channel, as I mentioned. We have our wonderful action themes, our monthly themes for 2024. For April is Earth Day. On April 22nd, Earth Day Network's monthly or theme for this year actually is plastics. The March monthly action theme for World Ocean Day was also the global ratification of the Plastics Treaty. So there's a lot of plastic pollution stuff going on. Be sure to check out the website. Yes, I see in the chat, again, the link to our feedback survey will be sent out via email. And then again, feel free to check out all of our resources on the World Ocean Day website and the websites for Sustainable Ocean Alliance, High Seas Alliance, and Youth for MPAs. I know all of us have wonderful resources and different ways to connect on our website. And yeah, last but not least, I just wanted to really say thank you to everybody who has joined for our program and to all of our wonderful speakers throughout the program and to you three. It was a wonderful discussion. I really, really appreciate it. Last question before I say goodbye. Will the certificates be sent out at a certain date? They will be sent out as soon as possible. They will be sent out after that deadline, after April 21st. So you have to be a little bit patient, but that's pretty much it. And yeah, I just wanted to, again, say a huge thank you to our wonderful panelists today. It was one of my favorite discussions I think I've ever had for one of these programs. So I really, really appreciate you guys taking time to join us for this discussion. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Nice to be here also.
Thanks so much, Riza.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
everybody.
Thank you, Shakira. That's it. I hope you enjoyed advocacy training for ocean and climate action. We will see you soon. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your evening, afternoon, morning, wherever in the world you are. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.